I want to say that this is an occasion which the Lord has made, and let's be proud in it. Today, I stand before you here as a candidate for the chairperson of the African Union Commission. I'm personally encouraged and humbled by the collective support for my country and the Eastern African region. The official unveiling of my candidacy as Kenya's nominee for the chairmanship of the African Union Commission is a major impetus and milestone in my bid. And I'm so happy that my brothers and sisters have taken time to come and be here physically and personally today. The history of Africa is replete of low and high moments. Africa is widely considered the birthplace of mankind, whose political organization was reflected in great kingdoms across the continent. And as of today, the oldest species of humanoid has been discovered in this region. So in Ethiopia, in northern Kenya, in Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. So there's no doubt that this is the home of mankind. However, the continent has suffered slavery, colonialism, humiliation, repeated aggression, and internal violent conflicts. However, Excellencies, like the legendary Phoenix, Africa has risen from the ashes of these historical atrocities to make a full-blown arrival on the global stage. Consequently, you have heard slogans such as African Renaissance and Africa Rising. Nonetheless, I envisage an Africa where our visionary sloganeering will translate into strategic action for the transformation of our continent. Unfortunately, even as we rise, our continent still grapples with emerging challenges and vulnerabilities, including identity conflicts and wars, hunger, poverty, violent extremism, advanced climate change, acute unemployment among our youth, transboundary pandemics and infectious diseases such as mpox and other threats to human security and dignity. The African people should feel the AU in their lives. Excellencies, if elected chairman, I propose to utilize the transition period to critically analyze the existing proposals for reforms and building capacity of the AU Commission. The ultimate aim is to follow up on the implementation of the reports so far formulated. Certainly, the story of Africa is not all gloom and doom. Thanks to the work Your Excellencies are doing, Africa has been on an upward and positive trajectory in recent years. In February, the African Development Bank reported that Africa will account for 11 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies this year. The continent is set to remain the second fastest growing region after Asia. I deeply appreciate your efforts in restoring hope on the continent, and it is my wish to have a chance to complement your efforts as AU chairperson. Excellencies, throughout my leadership and service to the public, I have noted the significance of defining strategic goals and appreciating the influence of political dynamics on the outcomes of these goals. So decision-making must be backed by a balance between policy and geopolitics. I plan to work with you, Your Excellencies, to integrate this continent. You're one people who unfortunately are trying too hard to separate from each other. I have traveled the length and breadth of this beautiful continent, and I have seen the faces of Africa's future. I was involved in peace negotiations in Burundi with Marimu Nyerere. I was involved as the mediator of the AU with the conflict in Côte d'Ivoire. I was involved in Mozambique. So I understand the continent. And I see the faces of our children, full of hope and energy, and unbound by the borders of yesterday. I dream of an Africa where those borders and colonial languages no longer divide us. We don't want to see Africans to be divided as Anglophones, Francophones, Lusophones. I want them to be Africaphones. From the hills of Kenya to the deserts of Sahara and the Kalahari, from the lakes of Great Rift to the rainforests of Central Africa, from Indian Ocean to the Atlantic, Africa must be one. Its resilience and hope for a bright future transmitted to our young people. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my selection to be Kenya's candidate is not about one man's ambition, but an African's journey to serve the motherland. Indeed, I plan to constitute my cabinet of chairpersons with a continental outlook. I'm grateful that friends and eminent persons across Africa have volunteered to engage in my campaigns from the West, North, South, Central, and of course, Eastern Africa. Excellencies, I'm ready to serve. My heart is ready, and my hands are steady, and with your support, I shall get the opportunity to be of service to Africa, the cradle of mankind. I am made in Eastern Africa for Africa. Afro-optimists, as opposed to Afro-pessimists. Afro-pessimists are those people who have given up on Africa, who say Africa is a lost cause, a wasted continent. But Afro-optimists are those people who believe in African development, that Africa can be developed with the efforts of the African people. This is what I believe in. I have come from the school that believes in the efforts of the founding fathers of our continent, those who were visionary, who envisioned an Africa that was united. Kwame Nkrumah, Ahmed Sekou Touré, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the late Emperor Haile Selassie, Jomo Kenyatta, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda. Those were some of the founding fathers of our continent, who believed that Africa will only develop if it is united. Nkrumah said that Africa must unite or perish. That is the school of which I'm coming. to be able to realize the dreams of the founding fathers, first we need peace on the continent. In 2013, they talked of silencing the guns. But in 2024, the guns are not silent on the continent. We will work to ensure that guns are silent so that we can be able to have a peaceful development. Secondly, Africa is a victim of climate change. Africa today suffers from twin disasters: droughts and floods on the continent. Yet Africa has emitted very little of the carbon that is polluting the world. So Africa needs to be compensated. But this will not come if Africa goes to negotiate as individual countries. If we go and talk as Kenya, as Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria, Mozambique, Egypt, or Algeria, the rest, those major offenders will not listen to us. But when we go and talk as Africa, they must listen to us. We'll be able to get a fair deal in the issue of climate change. We also need to green Africa. But Africa is also home to the second largest carbon sink in the world, the Congo forest. But how do we continue to green Africa, to arrest desertification, southern advance of the Sahara Desert? These are issues, they are challenges which we are equal to. We can be able to deal with these issues effectively if you have got an effective organization in Addis Ababa. African youth today drown in the Mediterranean, trying to get to greener pastures in Europe. It's a shame. We must arrest this trend and ensure that we create conducive environment within the continent here. That this youth do not have to flee to go to Europe. And this will only happen if Africa works together as a united continent. We know that Africa is one of the richest continents on planet Earth. It is a paradox. The richest continent is also the poorest in terms of living conditions of its people. This we must put to rest. We should not continue to blame those other people who have exploited the continent. We have the ability to reverse this trend and get Africa moving forward again. Africa is wasting a lot of time searching for markets where they put very unequal terms to our goods coming from Africa. The inter-African trade today stands at only 15%. Inter-European trade stands at 70%. Inter-Asian trade stands at 60%. Even inter-South American trade stands at 35%. We need to ensure that Africa trades more with itself. We need to address the constraining factors. One, the non-tariff barriers which have been imposed by other African countries against goods from neighboring countries. More importantly, we need to address the issue of infrastructure development in the continent that will make it easier for African countries to trade with each other. I have been the High Representative of the African Union on the issue of infrastructure. So I know the major challenges that Africa faces, the trans-African highways, the Cape to Cairo, the Tunis to Cape, the Dakar through Khartoum to Djibouti, the Dakar, Lagos to Mombasa, the Beira to Lobito and Walvis Bay, the high-speed railway networks in the continent, those are issues that require to be dealt with. The LAPSET, the Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia, that will continue through Bangui and go all the way to the Cameroon port of Kribi, creating a land bridge that links the Atlantic Ocean and Indian Ocean and opening up the interior landlocked countries within the continent. These are some of the issues that can be dealt with and we'll deal with. Then connecting Africa through high-speed fiber optic network. And then to facilitate faster communication. Then the issues of air transport. Air transport is a major challenge in the continent. We were talking about open skies to make air transport easier. Today, traveling across the continent is too expensive. You have to get permits to fly over countries, delaying movements, and make it too expensive. Flying over Europe is much easier than flying over Africa. We need to have a continental air control system within the continent so that people can travel from east to west, north to south without a problem. The other one is the issues of visas. My friend Aliko Dangote says that for him to travel across the continent, he needs 35 visas. His French competitor does not need a visa to travel with a French passport in Africa. What a shame. In Europe, you only need a Schengen visa, and you can travel across the entire Europe without a problem. We will also ensure that we reach a stage where we can issue an AU visa and enable people to travel across the continent without much of a problem.